You are a small boat. The harbor is immense. It is exactly now, says your father, who is not here. You should go out into the water. Yes, says your mother, who understands how frightened you are. Where is she now? Ash and bone. Go out, go out. Call the investigators of psychedelics. They have grants. How can this be a harbor, I say? It has no end. I can see without my glasses. The moonlight spreads like butter on my hands. Are you telling me the world is a harbor? God is a harbor? Beauty a harbor? Yes, for now, nods my mother. We're here, says my father. Maybe you can't see us. It's like that. You can't see it. Sometimes you can. The Harbor, a poem in the chapbook of our guest tonight, Catherine Bancroft, and the book is entitled The Square Where Aradni Sleeps. So, welcome. My name is Charles Carr, and welcome to Philly Loves Poetry, a collaboration between the Moonstone Arts Center of Philadelphia and PhillyCam. The focus of our program is to give our viewers, our audience, the experience of the rich culture of poetry in the city of Philadelphia and the surrounding area. And tonight we have a local poet, much beloved poet, very talented poet, multi talented poet, Catherine Bancroft. And we'll call her Kitty. Catherine is an artist and writer. She has shown her work at Fireworks Gallery, St. Asaph's Gallery, Fankenthal Pethick Gallery, Muse Gallery, Third Street Gallery, Off the Wall Gallery, and elsewhere. Catherine works in collage, altered books, acrylic, and mixed media. Her current Ellis Island series is Conta Crayon and Acrylic was inspired by photographs of early 20th century immigrants. Catherine has written book reviews for the Philadelphia Inquirer, co-written 2 children's books, Felix's Hat and That's Philomena, and has read her poetry at the Green Line Cafe, PAFA, Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, Big Blue Marble Bookstore, Fergie's Pub, and other venues. You can reach Catherine at her email address at cbancroft@culina.com. I'll say that again, cbancroft at Culina, CULLINA.com. The Square Where Aradni Sleeps, poems by Catherine Bancroft, was selected as the #1 in the A.V. Christie chapbook series. So let us welcome Catherine Bancroft. I'll call her Kitty, as most of us do. It's great to have you, Kitty. And I just wanted to tell our viewers that throughout our discussion, there will be examples or samples of your work flashed up. And if people want to see more, if you go to that website, you will be able to see a pretty large collection of very remarkable paintings. So I wanted to start off our discussion, Kitty, right away with the title in your chapbook of Aradni, who is a Cretan princess in Greek mythology. And I would like to ask you, why did you choose that as your title? And what part does she play in this book? And how have you represented her in these poems? And what does she really represent in this book of poems?
Well, it's a good question, Charles. To be honest, I've never really thought about, it was an intuitive choice to make her the title, or rather the square where Ariadne sleeps, the title. It's based on this painting. In fact, in the chapbook, there are 3 poems about Ariadne, all of which are inspired by this De Chirico painting that you're seeing on the screen right now. But otherwise, the poems are mostly contemporary life. So it's a good question. Why does she get to be part of the title? And why was this important to me? And I think this painting transfixed me from the time I first saw it. It's De Chirico painted it in 1913. He was a Greek painter who had come to Paris as a young man. These were a group of paintings. He did about 6 or 8 of them in around that time before the First World War. And interestingly enough, he lived a long time till 1958. He went on to do 100 more paintings of Ariadne. So he was very obsessed with this figure. And it's interesting to think about why. I know for me, there's something very mysterious in the figure of a woman lying in the middle of a public square. She's a statue, but she also seems like a person. There's nobody else there. And it's also odd because of the nature of the myth of Ariadne. So I'll just quickly say that the background, she was, as many of you may remember, the person who gave Theseus, a prince from Athens, a ball of thread when he was supposed to be sacrificed to the Minotaur in the labyrinth in Crete, where Ariadne was the princess. And because of that ball of thread, he was able to escape the Minotaur and escape the labyrinth. And he then wanted her to marry him, partly out of gratitude on his part. They sailed off to go back to Athens, where she would become the queen. And when they stopped at this island of Naxos in the Mediterranean, they got off, and he then got back in the boat without her and left her there. So the scene that is being evoked in what De Chirico painted is Ariadne left alone. And it's an old trope in the sense that in classical times, there were a lot of statues of Ariadne sleeping when she'd been abandoned. And she's seen as something of a tragic figure. But for me, partly because of the way De Chirico painted it, she seems not so much tragic as someone who has an opportunity, because I'm very intrigued by how still she is in that painting. She's sleeping. She's not paying attention to anything. She doesn't actually look dejected. She just looks away. And for me, that image, she's an image of a kind of hiddenness, of someone. Normally you think of her as abandoned, but I'm interested in what's going on in her mind and how that moment where she's allowed to dream, she's allowed to be alone, nothing is disturbing her. In that painting, one of the things that makes it an early surreal painting is that although it appears to be quite realistic, De Chirico has taken all people out of the square, even though it's clearly a sort of urban square. And there's a clock, which I'm not sure you can see in this, but a little higher above the arcades that are facing you. There's a clock, and it's set at a time which makes no sense. It's set for 2:00, but clearly the shadows that are present at that moment make it actually much later. So time has stopped for her. Aside from the train moving in the distance, nothing is moving. There's the only sound we can imagine happening is the sound of the train. So I see her as a woman who is coping with a major change in her circumstances by entering a dream and dreaming her into herself, into her next stage, which seems to me a very good thing to do. And I think part of why it attracted me, this painting and her figure in it, is because at the time I was writing these poems, my life was changing. I was far from being abandoned, but a lot of things were going away. My children were leaving home, were ready to go out into the world. I had been a teacher most of my life, but now had stopped teaching. I had also been a writer, but of things like book reviews or academic writing. I'd gone back to graduate school. I was supposed to be writing a thesis, but I wasn't getting very far on it. And I was finding myself turning more and more to poetry and to art, both of which feel to me fundamentally dreamlike occupations or activities. So I think so the three poems, when it comes time for me to read, I'm going to start by reading the three poems about Ariadne, and they kind of shape, they give the book a certain arc. I mean, it's a short book. This is a chapbook, but it has a certain arc to it. And in the beginning, we just have Ariadne, sort of in effect, in this almost abstract way, arriving as a package. And then in the middle, I get in a dialogue with her, and I question some of what her assumptions might be about her situation. Basically, I'm saying, are you sure it's such a bad thing that Theseus left you behind? Maybe you wouldn't have wanted him anyway, and for various reasons. And then she speaks back to me. And then at the end, the last poem, she and I'm in the painting studio. So that kind of represents where I ended up in this path that I was taking away from where I'd been, with the new stage I was entering. And I'm talking to her, or I'm not so much talking to her, but I'm comparing our situations. So I think she felt, and, thinking about it, I thought, well, does she apply to all the other poems? And I think I could make an argument for all of them in a certain way because of the fact that so much of them are about coping with change, loss. The one you read is very relevant in a way, The Harbor, because that's about the sense of going out into a big expanse and you don't know where you're going or where you're going to end up or what it is.
I think the one part of the myth about her that fascinated me, and I think you're bringing home to modern life, modern society, is the fact of the cleverness which she used to save him. But then, on the other hand, to be abandoned. And I thought of how many women today have done the same thing and then ended up abandoned. And in abandonment, they find a strength in themselves, to be able to continue on. And so that's the part of the myth that I really found absolutely fascinating.
Yes.
Not the fact that she was abandoned, but my God, she saved him. And what she did to save him was really remarkable.
Yes.
And that's what stuck in me. So I just wanted to continue with that line of thought and with your poems. And I have a habit when I read a book of poems, and I don't know what it is, but there's usually one poem that I kind of land on. And sometimes within that poem, it might be a stanza or a line that I keep coming back to. And I only say to myself, somehow, Charles, this is giving you perspective on the book of poems better, and maybe a perspective on the poet itself. So, particularly in your collection, there's one poem entitled It is the space that contains the relationship's secret life." And in it, you write, "Imagine what is seen and not seen, and not seen, what we normally ignore. A painter looking at negative space. How we see is not how things are." Can you amplify on that? Can you explain? I think it's a very fascinating line in a poem, but a fascinating line within the overall collection of this book of poems?
Yeah, well, I think the concept of negative space is something that doesn't really come up in ordinary life, but as soon as you study art in any form, you learn it right away. And it refers to the space that we tend to not take for granted or not even acknowledge at all as having any importance. It's the space between things. And when you're studying an object in order to draw or paint it, one of the things that you immediately realize is that what's the space around it is what is making the shape that you are trying to convey or to gather and put into your work. So it's and then so I'll just say a little bit about the nature of this poem, because the poem itself kind of illustrates what I'm talking about here. I was thinking about negative space. I mean, it was something I've been thinking about, in doing art, but I was thinking about it in particular because I've been reading a wonderful work by a woman who was an analyst and a painter named Marion Milner, and she was writing about negative space. So I was thinking about it and writing myself, just writing my own thoughts about it. And as I was doing that, my husband kept bringing things up. We were having a conversation. I mean, he wanted to have a conversation, or he had things he wanted to say. And I was feeling like I just want to keep doing what I'm doing here. And this is kind of the way real life works. You have this idea and you may think of it as a very important thing that you're doing, and you want to focus on it, but somehow life breaks in the form of a husband or a dog or a child or having to take the trash out or whatever. And I suddenly thought, the very way in which I'm prioritizing thinking about negative space, it right now is illustrating how I'm not allowing life as it's coming in right now to have an equal right to be there with me. So because when you actually, for example, if I'm drawing an immigrant, sometimes I will just do all the space around their face, not their face. And that will, in a way, define it in a different kind of way. So it's like I'm seeing, like I might have started this by putting in the maroon in the one you're looking at now, or in some of the group ones. I've sometimes not finished a face, or in this one, this is of Serbian Roma, a family of Serbian Roma. The sort of beige background color, you can see that the man with suspenders, I've almost created his hair by drawing around it rather than actually drawing the hair. So, and you can get fascinated by the things that are not what it is we supposedly are focusing on, and how they actually create what we're focusing on. And it's the relationship between them that is really what we're seeing. So it's all about seeing and how we see and what we choose to ignore because we don't acknowledge its fundamental role until we see differently. And I think with art, as with writing, there's a lot of unlearning that has to be done about how we look at things. So what I ended up doing in this poem, which I will read later, is giving some of the thoughts that I was having about negative space and kind of going on from there about the individual in relationship to the group, and these kind of lofty, big thoughts being interrupted by the things my husband was saying, which of course I changed. I made it, yeah.
So taking that concept, okay, that view into writing, was looking at an interview that you gave, and the interviewer asked you a question about, as a medium, what does painting offer that writing does not? And your answer was, I found fascinating. Early on, you answered, I realized that making visual art tapped an older part of myself than writing did, a pre-verbal part. And seeing my hand had a more direct relationship with what I was portraying, what I saw, wanted to express, traveled down my arm in onto the canvas and without having to pass through my brain, or so I imagined. So I guess I wanted to ask that question about the painter and the poet, and how do they relate, or is there really like a separation, not only time wise, or is there really an integration? And so we don't have a lot of, we do have poets that paint, but this is a fascinating thing to think about. Painters that write and write
Well,
really great poetry.
I think that, yes, for me, painting is obviously, that's the first thing, much more physical, much more involving the body, much more, if you want to. I mean, some people can work in tiny miniatures, but involving big gestures that can involve the whole body. Um, and I think their poetry and painting actually have a lot in common. I feel as if, for me, in this latter part of my life, when I've started doing much more painting at first, and then also started doing much more poetry second, the painting actually really helped me with the poetry, because having been someone who'd done the other kind of writing, the more academic, analytic type of writing for graduate school, or as a teacher, or um, in writing book reviews for the Inquirer, in all those things, uh, you have to be explaining a lot, and you have to be making arguments. And in poetry doesn't really want explanations. It wants to just be. Um, so I think that the way in which doing painting got me more in touch with a sort of, the image, as opposed to the words that are sequential, and that kind of take you through time. A painting is just immediate in a very different way. So um, it also, because I came to do more painting later in my life, I didn't follow the rules. I wasn't as good a dutiful little good girl student as I had been most of my life. So uh, that also helped, because I think I came to painting without, already wanting to break the rules and try do things as I felt them, as opposed to how I was supposed to do them. And then that helped with poetry. So I also feel like doing each, I learn things that I can apply in the case of the other. For example, learning how important it is to both add details sometimes, and then other times take it away. So it's half of the time you put in the detail in order to take it away. And that's true with both, and you have to
Mhm.
judge that. So revising is central in both cases, and I learned a lot, just how you had to let go. You had to not be too attached to anything you did, which is very clear with painting.
Yeah. So with this regiment that you have of painting, okay, and then you have these two things that you're paying attention to, your painting. I would ask you, and as I ask any poet, what is the discipline around poetry? How do poems come to you? Some people say, well, they have a discipline that every morning they get up at 6 o'clock and they, for 3 hours, they sit in front of their computer and whatever, and they wait till something comes or doesn't. And other people say, no, I wait till something really comes. And might not be a day, might not be a week, but it comes eventually. So I ask you the same question: how does poetry come to you?
I would say it's both of what you described. Uh, the workshop that I joined back in 2007, which I'm still in, and that I know you from also, Charles, is the way in which I enforce. It's like enforcing getting exercise every day, which I don't do every day, but I do go twice a week to swim at the Y. And I meet other people there and they expect to see me. So I have to have a good reason if I don't go. And in the same way, I have something which is an external structure and a deadline, which really helps. And I mean, there's many more ways it helps, but just the fact that every week I have to produce a poem and I'm around other people who are also doing that. And I'm getting stimulated by what they do and getting the wonderful feedback from Leonard Gontarek, who runs the workshop, and from the other people, and knowing that other people will hear what I wrote. So all of that helps me just keep that alive. But then, the fact is, sometimes, he'll give prompts and I will not do them. I'll do my own thing. I'll do what it was that kind of inspired me. So there's another whole aspect to it, which is how in my life I know what circumstances help me be more likely to have something come to me. So I've learned that over time. And one of them, which again comes back to what I was saying earlier, why I identify with Ariadne, is dreaming. So in the morning, after I've woken from a dream, what I've learned to do is, rather than simply write down the dream, I'll write down the dream, but already start to make it into something else and already start to try and integrate what everything else has been happening in my life, because I trust the dream to have gotten to some essentials in its own language. And I want to have a conversation between that kind of thinking the dream is done and what I think. So that's been something that I find is another source of dreams for me. Of poems. Yeah, for me, they do sometimes interchange.
Yeah, fascinating. So this has been a wonderful conversation, and I could continue it for another hour, really. But the one thing that we're here to is poetry and to listen to your poetry. And so I would like to kind of make that transition so we can uh, listen to some of the, really remarkable poetry that you have written. And I'm looking forward to, I'm sure our audiences as well. So the stage is yours, Kitty.
Thank you, Charles. I'm going to start, as I said, with the three poems that kind of structure the chapbook. And if we can, I'd like to have the, okay, so this is the picture. This is a painting that I did of a Greek woman as part of the Ellis Island series. So she was someone who came in the early 20th century. And she seemed the appropriate person to be on this cover, to be a stand-in for Ariadne. That's the photograph that I did the painting from. And so now, while I read these three poems, I'd like you to be able to see the De Chirico painting. That is, yes. Okay, so again, we're seeing the De Chirico painting. By the way, it's called The Soothsayer's Recompense, and it's at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. This is the opening poem of the chapbook. The Square Where Ariadne Sleeps. Yesterday, a small package arrived marked heavy. It spoke with the body of a woman. Everything was true. She lay on the stone the whole time. Her words entered my ears. The arcades held their breath, didn't speak. Isn't it marvelous how we can start again, said the lady with red fingernails sitting on the bus, confiding to her friend. This next poem, also inspired by this painting, comes in the middle of the chapbook. Ariadne and Me. 1. When you've been abandoned by your great idea, it's a good idea to sleep in a public square. Something will come to you. Maybe a train, winter sunshine, yellow dust, time, Dionysius after a while. 2. So I asked her, since you are half sister of a bull, would you have liked Athens anyway? Lusty girl used to bull baiting at night when fig torches stream light. Better even be a statue caught in stone than the wife of a pedant named Theseus, who breaks his word, a hero do-gooder assuaging everyone else's fear, addicted to promises, in a city run by Athena, too wise for her own good. That's what I told her. Tonight, the tire of Theseus's car is probably resting on ice. No longer your job to tell him, I said. Better to no longer be the person who does psychic laundry. How many times can you say, don't lose yourself, remember where you came from? He'll go in again as hero. Forget about it, break the thread. Also, I took the screw out of my eyeglasses. I don't know if she hears any of this through her dream. 3. Where I arrived was not what I expected, she said. There's no way back. 4. Some say Ariadne died on Naxos, others that she married Dionysius. I can't get out of my head that the clock stopped for her and waited while she slept. So this third poem about Ariadne comes near the end of the chapbook. It's called Ariadne and Me Not Leaving. I stayed put. The class was over. I couldn't stop painting the Moroccan man. The cleaner came in, banged easels. I wanted to choose which green, where his cheek would begin, how it would affect the unbleached titanium, the level where his mustache comes down. The statue sleeps on the plaza. No one's around. At the back, a train runs. Theseus and his sailors have gone. They're a white sail in the distance. It's 4 o'clock and I'm still not moving. Another class coming in. What is the future? Let me stay in the sun, shadowed by arcades black in their yawn. I can't hear you. Did you speak? An arm over my face makes enough dark. Meanwhile, a beard grows blue on a man. Freedom is uncommonly silent and fine. Theseus left her. Later will come Dionysius. Sleep, Ariadne, in your folds of white stone. Some call it abandonment. I call it dreaming. De Chirico paints you. The train hoots on its trail. It's 1913. Unseen gunmakers ready their guns. Hold on to your thread, Ariadne. Let it unwind. This next poem I'm going to read is also from the chapbook. Bureau. We have a bureau in the hall. It's tall. Put a letter on it, the letter will go. Does it prove I am shallow, that I am satisfied by the existence of something like a bureau in the hall? The bureau's near the door. It was my friend Jean's aunt's. The aunt died. 6 drawers, just right for a family of 5. The children gone, make their own arrangements now. Will we take it with us? Sometime, not soon. We will have to move somewhere. It has winter in it. My husband's balaclava, scarves, gloves, the ice grippers I bought after I slipped on a drive. It is not elegant. It has no shine, no carvings. When you pull on the knob, some come out. It looks like the doll's bureau I had as a child. Barbie's pink heel, the note Jeff Pardee passed me in class, a foreign coin, a ticket. We have Jane's white beret, Alice's 2 small gloves, the scarf Luke never wore. I know. Did I mention the drawers don't close? They muffle the sound of the door. The poems I'm about to read are mostly not from the chapbook. Some are newish, some are older. This is a newish one. And this one I want to dedicate to teachers. The teachers I had that made me want to be a teacher, and the teachers that I now have in the realms of poetry and painting, who provide what I describe in this poem, and much more. Accompaniment. She opens the book at the right page. She makes no mistake. We are young. She holds the ladder. We climb each rung. Some sing low, some high. Her fingers tell us to begin. We are many, she one. She is alone with the right page. She opens our mouths. She nods us into song. We sing what we haven't known. Because of her, we stop when it is time. Sound in the air. A book you remember lingers there. That's gone. It grew from her. are rising at the end to leave her, the book open. This is also going back in time to my young adulthood and before that childhood. The places where they had boats. The fishermen in Labrador, 2 summers I taught children, had lined faces and blue clothes, the hard life of ropes passing through hands with sudden quickness. The fish disappeared. My life is a necklace. At one end is the churning sea that still was real. At the other, apple phones. Empty texts come up in my net. The cod are gone. My father and I walked to the oldest tree in the far field, an oak, on the hill above the cow's salt lick. I blew dandelion puffs. We watched cows look at us and chew. Now the field will have a large McMansion, a thick pillared bridge over the stream where the watercress grew. In sunset, we went to the flat, wide field a neighbor rented for corn, saw the deer necks bent, flicker of their tails, their turn and leap into the trees. Each time he told me the story of the culvert he'd built where the path flooded. Now it's a road. He's gotten tired. Don't let me be one whose fences fall down, hedges grow. He had a horror of that which he no longer had the energy to stop. I had the energy. I was young. To imagine nothing was impossible. The big and dusty barn where the lambs were born stood shakily, fleece so wet and close it was like soft pearls. The man who bought it, who my brothers and sister and I sold it to, made the barn into a mansion and tore down the old house. I must go down to the sea again. In the dining room, my father was laughing, knowing it made a nice sound. He knew it was nothing we could make money with. The lambs packed with tiny curls like the hair carved on the heads of Greek gods found in the sea, dredged up under a light in the museum, come from fish and salt, and mewing, slimy, looking for their fat mothers standing on their trembling legs. So Matisse is one of my gods of painting, and I wrote this. These are 3 short poems I put together and call it Matisse Suite. And this is from quite a long time ago. Matisse Suite. Nude. My body's shadow in rubbed chalk, whiteness shining out of dark, bulbs and flank, torso's stalk. Here I am, bare, uncaring. Go ahead, I know you're staring. It's nothing that I'm bearing. So have your dream, lick the heavy separated cream. I keep to myself what I do not seem. Wings. Originally a kind of fling of God's pencil, drawing rings and loops and ovals, frivolous things, around human shoulders in the freestyle artists get to after a while, when the human form beguiles into dream, and from dream grows more than eye or finger knows, petals imagination's rose. Photographer. Patiently I sat for the hunched photographer under his black cloth hat, making his 8x11 mat. Under his gaze, in a pleasant daze, I counted ways. Sweet new dress, swelling breast, hesitating tenderness. Okay, this is from Domestic Life of the more or less present. The man on the floor. We'll get in his truck to make out an invoice soon. You're going to have heat in your kitchen now. You won't recognize it, he says. He has the eyes of a spaniel. My painting is on the easel, also finished for today, perhaps finished. The woman looking sideways into her scarf. The work of the hands is letting heat flow, overcoming blocks. I can see his bald spot. He's on his side. His assistant brings the 12-inch crescent wrench. I have to stop painting when I get tired because I could go on all night, not sure the red is right. You brought the silicone. Did you forget the vacuum, Roger? He turned up the thermostat. The house smells like wet dog. Do you mind if we cut your floor, Roger? Can you cut the floor? Like having 2 happy dogs in the kitchen. If you knew how much we had to pay for this part. Now, the next 2 poems are from the chapbook, and the second one I'm about to read is the one that we talked about. But this is the first one, Pandemic. To be only one teeters on need. To be two means you don't have to break and enter. A silent taking heed, an acquiescence comes to giving what the other needs. You become your own country, have your own small wars, parades, history. You have a news feed, are your own legend with a catchy soundtrack, merch. A couple rubbing each other gently, moving their fingers, can make affection flow back to them from the ordinary, from the faraway past, which rarely felt as much like a river onrushing as this time does, don't you find, my partner, who has under your arm a stubborn raft, in your hand marmalade toast. Okay, so this is, I'm going to read in slightly different voices, the two voices in this poem. It is the space that contains the relationship's secret life. I feel a rush of energy. I've lifted a curtain. I'm sleepy. Are you ready for bed soon? Imagine what is seen and not seen, what we normally ignore. A painter looking at negative space. How we see is not how things are. Did you remember to call about the health plan? We live in our dream. The more the dream confesses, tomorrow then, it can upset the precarious balance we make. Did you by any chance buy any toothpaste when you were at Rite Aid? That keeps our ordinary lives going. This one is almost out. So many realities present at once. Remind me, I hate that floss. Seeing the common interest. The woven kind might be better. I read in an article it was. And imposing its vision on disparate realities. Woven is thicker. Where'd I put my pajamas? We should wash these sheets sometime. Is how we create our reality. The glide always gets stuck at the same molar. The whole has its own presence. It's ridiculous to have to fight the thing that's supposed to be helping you, which to be sensed must mute the voice of the individuals. A piece of floss stuck between your teeth, then what? Another piece of floss to get the floss out? And at the same time assert the truth of the individual. Did you hear in Hungary they're making it a criminal offense for an NGO to assist migrants? What we ignore creates our reality. Do people realize what they're giving up? It defines what we see, but we don't notice it. Prosecuting someone for giving a hungry person food and water? It's like the 1930s. I have to wake up early. Did you turn on the alarm? Did you hear me, Angel? Baby carrots. They call us babies. We are not. Short, yes, and sweeter. Stunted, face it. Not your dream of innocence. Oh, sing to me of sorrow. Joan Rivers plucked and sheared and made new. Like us, was old. Who doesn't love the innocent? Have some hummus? The moon. This evening, I'm thinking about the moon. The way the moon thinks about me, dispassionately. I try to have as little emotion as a rock in space when I think about a rock in space. Body thinks this is ridiculous. Soil, earth, wine, daffodils, she says, small birds chasing foam, morning sun, you are a body. Yeah, I say, but moon is calm, watches this conversation, doesn't care either way. Body and I have arguments a lot. Your place, she says, is obvious, right here. This is life. No one is going to win a fight with body. She's got childbirth and periods, small paper cuts, osteoporosis, not to mention dementia on her side. Knows me too well, and we're both getting tired wondering when dinner is. I want to rebel, be stately and curious, turn in my orbit, make the tides run after me. Yeah, right, it's not in the cards, Body says. Moon is sailing behind the neighbor's pine. In a few weeks will go away, then gets to come back just as before. Change is not the beginning of the end, returns to what she was again. Why can't I be like that, I say, just decently going from one state to another, no suffering, and returning here to behind the pine, I say. You're forgetting something, Body whispers. Hey, do you think the moon gets to have lovers? Body is pressing it. Body is into this. That big old hard thing rotating in space alone? I say, but men, they act like moons sometimes. Exactly, we have to howl at them, Body says. Irish handwoven. When I came in the night, we had the fire in the lower field for New Year's. Falling wood gathered in the meadow where the deer were and the stream wound by. She was breathing in as softly as the blue looked. I was half still in the cold night air. Stars hung above the sparks. All the falling in the night that night. The blanket didn't go to the hospital with her. My father remarried. He died. I got the blankets, the two same ones that had lain on their double bed. I wish I remembered more. The blue is the way the curtain lets the sun through. It folds around me. It follows me. One thread has come loose, catches on my hand. One day I will have the courage to cut it. We are constructed to love the world. The chair that pushes into the earth when you sit on it, each meal outside you're shorter. The birds who leave their shit on side tables, squiggles on plastic green. The paper towel I've bunched up to wipe it off, waiting to be taken. I'm here too, don't think you can ignore me. I crunch my apple. A fly this morning landed by the toaster. I picked him up thinking of religion, not killing any living creature. He, inside a Kleenex, carried to the door, cleverly escaped, went back to the toaster, the smell of crumbs. Too many days, some would say, lie by my feet to hope for better. What I have not accomplished is enough for a poem. My mother was a gardener of the daylilies. Too many, they need weeding. I wish I could see her, we could wave, the way I just did at our neighbor out training his dog Hazel. With the dead, it's not pretending it would be fine for them to come back. There are too many. It's just to know she is somewhere. Sweetheart, you're doing well, would be good to hear. Birds, too, the way they don't use words. Swoop in and away, fences nothing to them. Our old bird bath has pine needles in it. Many general signs of wastage and disuse. It's okay. Leave piles of sticks and old leaves, they say. Birds like to make nests in them. The undone singing. By the river. On the stones of the beach by the river, I am looking over the water. The whale rises again. He calls himself a theology operator. No one knows what that means. It's not calling yourself a minister or a man of God. He seeks, it would seem, our belief in God, or how to get through. He looks like Abraham Lincoln. Trust is the issue. Do I make room for him? His daughter is wearing my old sweater. She has cysts, asks that I rub her chest in circles to move the fluid. How strange the faith she places. My hands on the soft sweater try to miss her breasts. He doesn't explain what he does. She doesn't apologize. There are problems that recur. Problems that recur are teachers, they say. Operator, can you connect me? I have rubbed skin through wool. I have circled the difficulty, the child's fear. I am here, though I disappear. On the stones of the beach by the river, the whale rises again. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is routine in marriage. You speak too loud, I speak too softly. You forgot to get my club sandwich, I broke your favorite cup. You left the hot water running, I poached space on your bookshelf. I danced on a hill in Scotland with a long-haired hippie. You ogled girls going down 17th Street. And those are what we saw and know, what we counted against and decided to forget. It comes up again if the sin repeats itself in a similar vein, which it does, human nature being consistent. Memories long when it comes to grievance. It doesn't mean there wasn't forgiveness. Ah, well. A teasing snort, a complaint, then a smile. A going on, even after a period of resentful silence. An acknowledgement, you will never be perfect. Which is a kind of forgiveness, a blank check. There are bigger sins I'm not mentioning. We've absorbed them, let time cover them over. A slow snowfall that changes the landscape if you can wait. The offer is to keep helping each other, to comfort each other. If it's us that did the hurting, regret that we did hurt. Know we are trying, and we will try, and it will give us Great pleasure when we give the other pleasure, if you like the coleslaw I made, if I appreciate the coconut tom yum soup you brought. Sometimes we'll be bored by what interests the other. We'll listen reluctantly to the long story. So it will be. We're different. This is what we know. Both remember the bright stream we discovered long ago when we met that runs underground and finds itself between us is why we are here now. That renews itself lying on the bed under the planets pasted to the ceiling that glow when the light is off and we laugh. That I can't remember Neptune. That soon you'll have to turn your back to me because otherwise you're lying on your frozen shoulder. Forgiveness is the deep made in the bed by two bodies. The springs are going. We have to adjust. The bed shows it recognizes us, can measure our time together in sag. It's okay, it says. I welcome you. He considers the dimensions of his garden. Mulch is sold by the yard, by the lawn, by the tree, by the man in overalls. Calculate the square footage of the area to be muddied, squelched on, its yearning, its longing, its being afraid to be laid. Multiply square footage by 0.25. Oh, that I were young again. Oh, holy night. Oh, Lord. Oh, well. Answer, 120 square feet, 10 circular toes, 3 rectangular fingers, 40 triangular webbed feet, 17 sweet words to lie her down. Calculation always getting what you need. Okay, just 2 more. Does that work, Charles?
You got plenty of time?
Okay. Path advisory. The point of wisdom is to know what is not. All those years lived is to know they are not, because one day they will not. With years, you know that. You sit on the chair and look at your old hands, leaning towards earth. She is painting you her colors. You are on her future team. My darling, she says, my sweet girl. And she passes over you toward your friend whom she wants too. She is every leaf's lover. I am ready for you, she says. And you who can no longer be what you were and are not anymore what, say it, I was wrong. I will not live forever. I would always have my above ground lover, I thought, but no, he too is going. Earth, the brown color of his age spots too. Not like the new hands of babies which are blue, so blue, so blue. Baby. I was carrying the baby. I said, isn't the sky beautiful? Said a little voice. Is it possible? Did you just say? I started to shout. She said her first. The baby interrupted me. Beautiful. It's obvious. Okay, you tell the story. The dawn was gold and streaming like a pan pouring syrup over the city. From then on, she did.
Can you give us one more?
Sure, definitely. Just have to find where I put it. Okay. Joy 2. So there's a series. I have a series called Joy. This is Joy 2. She's collecting fallen blossoms in an old-fashioned basket. Shepherdesses in 18th century paintings with wide hats wore them on their arms. Are you making a sachet, I say, having just moved one in my underwear drawer, old, with hardly any power to remedy or evoke or sing? She says proudly, I'm making a syrup. You can eat lilac. It doesn't last long. It follows lily of the valley, which grows wide and strong. Have you seen it in its green arrow points almost hidden? I have never followed spring so closely. Each shoot from out the fat weeds, the clump by the garage, each raw red bud spread on the giant trees, each white star on the corner grass plant. I sighed, my neck creaking from the looking up, sore from stooping to add compost. I wanted to borrow the joy, like a library book, with many signed names on its back card. So many have loved her before me. I've been careless before. I had too much of my own joy. Now old, I'm borrowing it. Full-faced, no shame, and it goes deep as my own name. In the silence of the backyard, no one else around. Hand on teacup, back in chair. Lilac that has no identity, belongs to no one. I'm so far into it. The robins are calling more to each other, like puffs of smoke from a man's cigar. Each says, this is only part of who I am.
Well, this has all been really wonderful, Catherine, Kitty. Terrific discussion. There would be lots more to discuss in the interplay of painting and poetry, but I very much appreciate you coming on to Philly Loves Poetry and sharing your talent, sharing your perspective on everything. Um, I wanted to, before I leave, there was a poem of yours that I was going to read also. And I was wondering if I could read that also. And it's from the collection. And the title of the poem is Lanternfly on the Arm of the Red Chair. The tree of pleasure is summer's tree. The tree of idleness also. The tree of no consequence. How we handle black and red spotted difficulties, too excited by other plans, ignoring how much pain we're in. I can't think of it now. The kind of trash tree that is the particular love of a lanternfly, who will climb over the bodies of other lanternflies to go up the glue, fly, paper Susan put around her maples. Finally, our wings get stuck. Legs are wriggling in air, imagining. Next time we'll love thy neighbor. Love lasts forever. I'll take care of you. No crumbs under the table. I remember the name. Tree of Heaven. The flypaper is black with us. That's a wonderful, wonderful poem. So once again, thank you. Thank you also to Erin Phelan, who is our uh, program manager, essentially behind the scenes, who have really made this possible, and the great job that she did in projecting those wonderful images of your painting. And I would say to people, if you want to see more of Kitty's work, to go to cbancroft at kulina.com.
Or actually, Charles, do you mind? Because that's my email address, but
Okay.
the web address is my name dot so it's www.catherinebancroft.kalina.com.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you straightened us out on that.
Yeah,
So,
thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I wouldn't leave once again without acknowledging that this show is just one of a series of programs that promote the love of poetry in the city of Philadelphia by the Moonstone Arts Center. And as I say, Larry arranges close to 100 readings a year, which really touch over 300 poets, and publications of anthologies and chapbooks and poetry books, etc. So I would ask you to go to our website, which is moonstoneartscenter.org, and look at a way that you can support us in any way you can for donation or some other way. It's a terrific organization. It's done a lot to spread the love of poetry in the city of Philadelphia, and I really call it one of the cultural treasures of Philadelphia, and it should be recognized as such. So thank you, everyone, for looking in. We'll be back again in March. We have Hayden Sunner, who's going to be our guest poet that night, so it should be grand. Once again, thank you, Catherine, and thanks for PhillyCam for making this possible.
Thank you, Charles.